am so glad and good morning, everybody. My name is Chinyere Emmanuel Egbe. I am a professor and chair of the Department of Economics. And so I welcome all of us to this event. And I thank the SEC and FTC for cooperating with us and assisting us in making this possible. And special thanks to Malvika Gupta and also to Joy Best, who have been instrumental in making this possible. And thanks to our dean. And so I use this opportunity to introduce Dean Joanne Roll, who will then go ahead and introduce Rich Best and Rhonda Perkins from SEC and FTC respectively. And our dean will give the opening remarks. Thank you very much and welcome to Medgar Evers College.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Joanne Roll. As Professor Egby said, I am indeed the Dean of the School of Business. And on behalf of President Rudy Crew and Provost Augustine Okereke and the rest of the Medgar Evers College family, I welcome you to the Community-Based Fraud During COVID-19 program presented by a collaboration of public-private partnership, which we at the School of Business believe is the platform for the future. Today's collaboration includes the US Securities and Exchange Commission, the Federal Trade Commission, and the Department of Economics and Finance in the School of Business here at the historic Medgar Evers College. We remember the name of the civil rights leader, Medgar Evers, who died so that many in underserved communities could be counted. We celebrate the memory of Medgar Evers. Uh, uh, we celebrate the memory of Medgar Evers as we celebrate Medgar Evers College with 50 years of service to the citizens of Brooklyn and the greater New York. It is in the spirit of this continued service today that we bring you this program, one designed to inform, help protect, and support those in our college and community family. Special thanks and acknowledgments to the program team and partners for putting together a wonderful program. Students, please listen, learn, engage, adapt, and enjoy the program. Now for the bios of the next voices you will hear. Richard R. Best was named Regional Director of the US Securities and Exchange Commission's New York Regional Office in September 2020. He was previously the Regional Director of the Salt Lake Regional Office, serving from July 2015 to February 2018, and Regional Director of the Atlanta Regional Office, serving from February 2018 to September 2020. Before coming to the commission, Mr. Best was chief counsel in the Department of Enforcement of the Financial Industry Regulatory Authority, better known as FINRA. Mr. Best was also a director, senior trial attorney, and the trial attorney at FINRA. Mr. Best previously worked as an assistant district attorney in the office of the Bronx County District Attorney Office. He was a supervisor in the Office of Rackets Bureau, where he managed high-profile public integrity and organized crime prosecutions, among other matters. Mr. Best received his bachelor's degree from the State University of New York College at Old Westbury and a law degree from the Howard University School of Law. Ms. Rhonda Perkins is an attorney in the Division of Marketing Practices in the Federal Trade Commission's Bureau of Consumer Protection. She has investigated and litigated cases involving telemarketing and business opportunity fraud, credit repair, and government imposter scams, deceptive marketing of rental listings, and deceptive marketing of trading and investment seminars. Ms. Perkins also works to combat fraud in low income and underserved communities as part of the agency's Every Community Initiative. Previously, she served as counsel to the director of the Bureau. Before joining the FTC, Ms. Perkins worked as an attorney at Legal Aid Justice Center in Virginia, where she litigated housing and consumer protection cases on behalf of low-income immigrants and conducted outreach to community members. Ms. Perkins received her BA and her JD degree from the University of Virginia. Now, I turn the program over to Mr. Best. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dean Roll. And thank you to Medgar Evers College, Professor Egby, Professor Jarberhall, for inviting us here also, Ms. Perkins. Before I begin, I would like to give a standard disclaimer that the Securities Exchange Commission disclaims responsibility for any private, public publication or statement of any SEC employee here today. Our remarks and discussion express our views and do not necessarily reflect the views of the commission, the commissioners, or other members of the staff. It's a standard disclaimer that we have to give, so now I can move on to introducing the SEC panelists. I'm going to go in alphabetical order, so I will begin by giving Ms. Best an opportunity to talk about her background at the SEC and her background even before coming to the SEC. So Joy, I hand it over to you.
Thanks, Rich. Good morning, everyone. Again, my name is Joy Best, and I began my career at the SEC in an entry-level examiner position in the Office of Compliance, Inspections, and Examinations, otherwise known as OC, the eyes and ears of the SEC. And I began my career at the SEC about 24 years ago after graduating from Brooklyn College with a degree in accounting. Later on, I sat for the CPA exam and went back to Brooklyn College, receiving my master's in economics. I'm now an exam manager, managing examinations of investment advisors and investment companies, which are also known as mutual funds, to determine compliance with the federal securities laws. I've been an exam manager for the last 9 years, and I'm very happy to be here with you today. Thank you.
Great. Joy, by the way, was my exam manager for the first 2 years that I was at the commission in New York. And I can tell you firsthand, she is an amazing advisor and mentor to all who have reported to her, and I'm thankful for her guidance. I have been with the SEC now for 6 years. Prior to that, I was at the Department of Labor doing ERISA enforcement. Prior to that, I was on Wall Street, and right out of law school, I was a legal aid criminal defense attorney. I am a public education person. I got my law degree from CUNY School of Law at Queens College, and I got my bachelor's in English and philosophy at the State University of New York at Geneseo College. And what drew me to public service was the fact that we needed to have not only representation, but to ensure that we are having the discussions, the outreach, the kind of participation that Medgar Evers is allowing us to engage in, because that's really what the SEC is charged to do, is to not only give you information, but to also protect investors. Thank you. You're up, Jorge.
Okay, I thought so. Hi, good morning. My name is Jorge Tenrero. I'm a senior trial counsel in the Division of Enforcement at the New York office of the SEC. I have been at the SEC for almost 7 years now, and in my role, I litigate in court or in administrative proceedings some of the enforcement actions that the SEC might bring against individuals or entities. Prior to joining the commission 7 years ago, I was in private practice in New York at a law firm called Cleary Gottlieb Steen Hamilton, and I also worked for federal judges for a couple of years out of law school. I graduated. I obtained my Bachelor of Arts in Mathematics and Economics and my JD both from Yale University and Yale Law School. And I'm very happy to be here.
Thank you. Who's our next speaker?
I think Professor Zarbabal will take the moderation lead, and then it'll be Rich and Professor co-moderating.
Yes. So good morning to everybody. Welcome
morning.
again. Good morning to you guys. And I just want to throw some things out to Rich and ask Rich to share a little bit about SEC's mission and purpose, kind of a high-level overview of what the SEC does, including what SEC stands for.
Thank you, Professor. So the Securities and Exchange Commission is the SEC, and when I've been other parts of the country, people have confused the Securities and Exchange Commission with the Southeast Conference. We're definitely not a football team, football conference. We are the Securities and Exchange Commission. We were created in 1934 as part of the Securities Exchange Act of 1934, and we were created to restore investor confidence in the capital markets following the crash of 1929 and the Great Depression. The Securities and Exchange Commission has a three-part mission. The first is to protect investors. The second is to maintain fair, orderly, and efficient markets. And the third is to facilitate capital formation. Now, you may ask, well, how do you do that? Well, we do it by doing a couple of things. One is to administer and enforce federal securities laws. The other is to oversee brokerage firms and investment advisors. And we also review filings by most public companies. Our organization is an independent agency of the executive branch of the federal government, and we have 5 presidentially appointed commissioners. No more than 3 of the commissioners can serve from the same political party. The SEC has 5 major divisions working together to make and enforce securities rules and regulations, including 2 that are represented on the panel today. One is our Office of Compliance, Inspections, and Examinations. We like to refer to them as OC for short. And as Joy mentioned, they are the eyes and ears of the SEC. And what that means is that many of the other divisions and offices within the commission, we tend to work in the home office or in some of our regional offices. We have 11 of them. But OC actually goes out and interviews registrants, people whom we regulate, and inspects their books to make a determination as to whether or not they're violations of the securities laws and rules. So from that perspective, we get a lot of information from our examiners and our exam teams in OC. In fact, people have said, and I agree, OC is oftentimes first on the scene when there's securities violations. The other division that you'll hear from today is the Division of Enforcement. And the Division of Enforcement investigates violations of the federal securities laws and brings civil actions. They negotiate settlements and refer actions to other agencies such as the Department of Justice for criminal enforcement. Professor Zarbabal, I hand it back over to you.
Thank you. Thank you. No, that's great. At this point, I want to go to the second organization that we're blessed to have, which is the FTC, not to be confused with the CFTC. And I will let the FTC explain a little bit about what they do, their mission, and their administration as well.
Thank you, Professor Zarbabal, and I'd also like to thank Medgar Evers College for this opportunity, as well as the SEC. And I don't know about you all, I'm pretty pumped after Dean Roll's opening remarks. So the FTC stands for the Federal Trade Commission. And similar to Rich, I'll have to give a disclaimer. My remarks today express my own views and do not necessarily reflect those of the FTC or any one commissioner. The Federal Trade Commission is a bipartisan federal agency headed by 5 commissioners with a dual mission to protect consumers and promote competition. And I am on the consumer protection side. The FTC protects consumers by stopping unfair, deceptive, or fraudulent practices in the marketplace. We conduct investigations, we sue companies and individuals that violate the law, and we develop rules to ensure a vibrant marketing place. And so, for example, my division enforces the telemarketing sales rule. Some of the FTC's law enforcement priorities include shutting down deceptive telemarketing schemes, stopping job and money-making scams, combating deceptive advertising of fraudulent cure-all treatments for health conditions, which is a really big deal right now with the pandemic going on, stopping deceptive debt-related practices, and combating deceptive and unfair practices related to data security and the use of consumers' personal information, and that's in our Division of Privacy. We collaborate with federal, state, local, and international law enforcement partners, including those with criminal authority, because the FTC is a civil law enforcement agency. And we do this to try to track down fraudsters and build actions to stop them wherever they are. The FTC also protects the public through education and outreach to consumers, as well as small businesses on consumer protection issues. And since we'll be discussing community-based fraud today, I wanted to mention something that Dean Roll mentioned, that I'm a part of the Every Community initiative. And this is an initiative that the agency has instituted because we know that consumers from certain communities may be targeted or disproportionately impacted by certain types of frauds. And we know from our research that fraud may be underreported by those groups, particularly in Black communities and Latino communities. And the initiative examines the impact of various schemes on distinct groups, such as Black and Latino communities, older adults, military service members, students, small business owners, low-income communities, as well as other groups. And we know from our experience and research that a lot of times those groups may be targeted for certain types of scams. So we use research on consumer reporting data by our Bureau of Economics, as well as input from stakeholders in those affected communities in order to develop strategies to prevent fraud, to inform our law enforcement program, as well as to expand outreach to those communities.
Thank you. Well, I'm going to turn it over to Rich to get us started with some questions in regards to our panelists.
Well, thank you. Now that we've met our panelists and know the general missions of the SEC and the FTC, let's talk about how we can recognize and prevent and report fraud during COVID-19 pandemic and beyond. We have to recognize that fraud can happen to anyone, regardless of education, age, money, or community. So it's a really timely topic. I'm going to turn to you, Joy, Jorge, and Malvika. Can you tell us what makes us particularly vulnerable to fraud right now?
Well, unfortunately, fraudsters sometimes seek to use difficult times, like what we are experiencing now with the pandemic, to take advantage of investors. So since March of this year, the SEC has been proactively monitoring our markets for fraud and other misconduct related to COVID-19, including looking for companies who make false claims about having a cure or a therapeutic for COVID-19.
Yes, and also in these distress situations, fraudsters use sometimes their own communities because they know they can prey on the relationship that they have with you as a potential investor and them as an advisor. This is called affinity or community-based fraud, where someone uses your religion or other commonalities such as race, ethnicity, church, houses of worship, and business community. And so we have to make sure that we are researching and understanding that relationship. And you as the potential investor should ensure that you are doing your own research to make sure you're not relying just on the affinity between you and the person who's asking you to invest.
Yeah, and an example of what Malvika was talking about, which we call, again, community-based fraud. There was a case last year that the SEC had where the SEC alleged that an individual by the name of Syed Arbab, a former University of Georgia student, was running a Ponzi scheme that targeted other college students and other young investors, especially those that were associated with the University of Georgia. So he was conducting this scheme from his fraternity house and was offering investments in a hedge fund that did not exist. collected approximately $1 million in investments from about 117 individuals. And instead of investing the funds, he was just using them for his entertainment expenses. So, that's one of many examples of this sort of community-based fraud that we're sort of looking at, that the SEC looks at.
Thanks so much. Perhaps we can hear from the FTC about some of the things that we should look at.
Similar to what Joy was saying, absolutely scammers are taking advantage of fears surrounding the pandemic. The FTC has seen a wide range of false treatment claims related to COVID-19, as well as scams related to the financial effects of the pandemic. People are struggling right now. A lot of people are losing jobs. They're looking for ways to make money or loans. So we're seeing a lot of scams related to that. And scammers are setting up websites to sell bogus products. They're using fake email, text messages, social media posts, which is another way to take people's money or to click on some malicious link in order to get their personal information. We've seen scammers asking people to donate money to victims for charities that do not exist. And they offer advice on unproven treatments. We also see, with people struggling financially as well as businesses trying to survive right now, there's a lot of scams related to false claims about government stimulus money, as well as deceptive financing terms, especially for businesses that are trying to keep their doors open. And once they get that financing, we're seeing abusive debt collection practices aimed at small businesses. Another thing that I'll mention, with people looking for ways to get a little extra cash right now, just one example of a consumer alert that the FTC issued in August, we posted a blog post about a community-based scam that pretends to be an informal savings club known as a SUSU. And this is something that has historic roots in West Africa and the Caribbean. And normally it's a savings arrangement between a small group of trusted people, usually friends and family, who regularly pay a fixed amount into a common fund and then take turns getting paid out as a way of community support. But scammers are pitching fake savings clubs and opportunities, and there's a variety of names: the Circle Game, the Blessing Loom, the Money Board, and they're trying to trick people into joining what is basically an illegal pyramid scheme. And they may try to contact people with direct messages on Instagram, Facebook posts, or other type of social media. And they promise people that they'll make more money than they put in, but it really depends on recruiting new people in order to keep the money flowing into the fund. And whenever you're depending on new recruits, that's a telltale sign of a pyramid scheme. And once the money runs out, because there's no more new recruits, everyone is left without any payout. So that's another example of taking what's supposed to be a community-based program and turning it into a scam and taking advantage of people because they really need money right now.
Thank you. No, that's great. Very timely. Let me throw this out to the panel. In regards to the era that we're in right now, COVID-19, how do each one of you on the panel identify your role in regards to fraud scams at this time? And in particular, what are you doing about the frauds that we've just mentioned?
Thank you, Professor. This is Jorge. I could start with that question. So as we've alluded to, in late March, the SEC's Division of Enforcement formed what we call the Coronavirus Steering Committee to coordinate the SEC's response to COVID-related enforcement issues. And so the agency's been active in bringing what we call trading suspension. So there's a stock that's trading, the SEC can suspend its trading, say on the New York Stock Exchange, for example. So the SEC has been doing that and bringing other actions that target fraudsters, including, again, companies that tout non-existent vaccines or cures for COVID or make false statements related to the manufacturing or sourcing capacity for protective equipment or COVID tests or things of that nature. So as one example, we recently suspended the stock of a company called Rising Biosciences, Inc., which was issuing press releases containing statements that suggested some of the products it launched in response to COVID-19 were approved by the CDC or registered with the Environmental Protection Agency. And so the SEC allege that the company statements, appear to be inaccurate, and under the power sort of given to the SEC by Congress, suspended the trading of the stock of that company. So, sort of the idea, generally speaking, is to protect investors and the markets from, these companies that appear to be falsely touting their products. And then another recent example was when the SEC charged a company and its CEO for making false claims about the company's ability to acquire and sell large quantities of N95 masks. So we filed a complaint in federal court where we said that the company never had any N95 masks and never had any agreements for the masks as they had claimed to the public, and never had any orders for the masks. So that's some of the work, but my colleagues, I'm sure they have other examples.
Thank you.
Thanks, Jorge. And on the examination side, OC has been attentive to incoming reports of tips and complaints made to the SEC by the public, private, and nonprofit sectors, as these tips and complaints may provide context for understanding a potential fraud or other illegal investment activities that may already be in progress. And based on these tips and complaints, we may decide to conduct an examination of the investment advisor or broker-dealer involved to verify what their investment practices actually are. And also, these tips and complaints we receive, they may inform our examination priorities, which means they will help us determine what we decide to focus on an examination. And in terms of the steps that OC has been taking during this time, the national and regional offices within OC have been coordinating efforts to examine any stock manipulations, false claims, new investment schemes, and sudden movements in the markets that may threaten investors. And lastly, OC has published risk alerts, which seek to educate investors and investment advisors about potential compliant risks that may be present in the industry. And these risk alerts are available to the public on the SEC's website, located at sec.gov.
Also at the SEC, we've been noticing activity related to the CARES Act of 2020. CARES Act was established to ensure that retirement investors could take out up to $100,000 from their retirement accounts or traditional IRAs. And these accounts, any withdrawals on them under the CARES Act would have been without penalty. And so instead, the fraudsters are using the CARES Act as an opportunity to prey on elder community, on retirees, to say you can now borrow or take out money from your retirement account, not for emergency financial needs, but for riskier investments. Or to tell them, roll your money out altogether, I have an amazing scheme for you. That is all fraudulent activity. So that's something we noticed. And in fact, there was an investor alert also on our sec.gov website. The alert is called COVID-19 related early withdrawals from retirement accounts. And also there's a national elder fraud hotline that anyone can call. It is 1-833-372-8311. To put it again, it's 1-833-FRAUD-11. Back to you, Rhonda, or kicking it to you, Rhonda.
Yeah, so we'll go to FTC now.
So to identify fraud or scams, the FTC collects and analyzes consumer report information through our Consumer Sentinel network. And Sentinel is a searchable online database that provides federal, state, and local law enforcement agencies with secure access to report from consumers about fraud and other problems. So this information is not publicly available. Law enforcement agencies and other organizations contribute consumer reports to the database, such as the Better Business Bureau, for example, will forward complaints by consumers. The FTC and its law enforcement partners analyze reports to look for trends, to identify problematic business practices, as well as to find targets for law enforcement actions. We also receive referrals directly from our law enforcement and community partners. For example, we've received referrals from legal services organizations. During 2019, Sentinel took in more than 3.2 million reports from consumers directly, as well as from Sentinel's data contributors. And if you'd like to know more about the types of fraud reported where you live, for example, if you want to know what are the top frauds reported in the New York area, the FTC publishes aggregate consumer reporting data on a quarterly basis in an interactive online dashboard. And that's located on ftc.gov/explore data. And if you are seeing scams or shady business practices, you can always report that to reportfraud.ftc.gov. So the next question is, okay, so you're seeing all this stuff, well, what are you doing about it? So in order to address, for example, the false treatment claims and the financial scams that we're seeing during COVID-19, the FTC determined that the fastest way to get some of these claims taken down is to send letters to the companies and individuals, warning them that their conduct is likely unlawful and that they can face serious legal consequences, such as a federal lawsuit. Yes, we will take you to court if they do not immediately stop. And since March of 2020, the FTC has sent more than 330 warning letters related to the pandemic. Now, this gives those companies an opportunity to rectify their practices, and there may not need to be further action. And some of those letters were issued jointly with the Food and Drug Administration. Overwhelmingly, the companies that received those letters took quick steps to correct the problematic claims. However, when it has not worked, the FTC has pursued law enforcement. For example, there was a case named Golden Sunrise Nutraceuticals, and in the FTC's complaint that we filed in federal court, the FTC alleged that the company deceptively advertised a $23,000 treatment plan as a safe, effective, and scientifically proven way to treat COVID-19. So they were telling people that their product could make the viral symptoms disappear within 2 to 4 days. So the FTC sent them a warning letter in April of this year that they should remove those claims that the products could prevent, treat, or cure COVID-19. And after the company continued making those claims, as the FTC alleged in its complaint, and continued selling the treatment plan, the FTC sued the company in federal court, alleging that the claims were unsubstantiated and that they had no basis for making them. And that litigation is ongoing. And in addition to warning letters and enforcement actions, the FTC also developed a multimedia campaign to provide information about the pandemic and its related consumer protection issues. And all of that is available at ftc.gov/coronavirus. And that webpage, and most of our web pages are in both English and Spanish. And that page contains information for consumers as well as businesses about law enforcement actions that we've taken, how to report COVID-related consumer issues. So if you're seeing these scams out there, you can go to that page and find out how to report it. We have fact sheets in 5 different Asian languages. There are alerts on pandemic-related topics such as stimulus payments, health and treatment claims. One recent post based on what we've been seeing is how to tell the difference between real or fake clinical trials. There's a lot of misinformation out there, and scammers are taking advantage of people who want to participate in these trials. We have alerts about charity fraud, government imposter scams, contact tracing, privacy issues, and the temporary stop of COVID-19 evictions, as well as scams targeting small businesses. And the FTC has conducted local as well as national outreach related to the pandemic and engaged with ethnic media that gets this information out to specific communities, community organizations such as legal services providers, and others through webinars, Facebook Live events, Twitter chats, and media interviews. Once again, all of this information is available at ftc.gov/coronavirus.
Nice.
Thanks, Rhonda. Thanks, Rhonda. I think now one of the things we may want to know is how do we recognize something that may be a consumer fraud or an investment fraud? So what are some of the red flags when making an investment decision, and how can investors avoid them?
Yes, Rich, we've been putting out alerts at the SEC as well through our investor alert, and it's investor.gov. You can check that out. Firstly, we should just all trust our instincts. If something sounds too good to be true, be it an investment idea, be it someone saying, oh, I'm going to meet those returns, I'm going to meet that target price, those guarantees are likely a scam. Also, as Rhonda was mentioning, charitable giving. This has been a time where we've all reached into our pockets, help in any way we can, but you should do your due diligence and check out the charitable IRS tax status at irs.gov. That's the first place you can go to ensure that is this organization in fact tax exempt? Is it a charitable giving organization? Separately, you can call the organization, you can ask them for literature. An email may not be enough. You have to do your diligence. Separately, if someone is pressuring you and telling you that you are special because you go to my church, you know my auntie, you go to the same temple, invest with me, I am safe, you can trust me. Again, they're using that affinity, that relationship between you as a potential investor and them as a financial advisor or someone who may be knowing of a new scheme. No investment requires you to make an investment right away. So take your time and do your research.
Yeah, and along those lines, we also typically tell people to be aware of offers to invest that sort of come out of the blue. So, for example, you get an unsolicited offer through a cold call, somebody just randomly calls you or sends you an email or social media. You should tread carefully when you didn't seek out the investment or the salesperson. Do your homework. If you're tempted by the offer, or better yet, walk away. But at the very least, sort of do your homework and diligence. We tell people to watch out when the person promoting the investment does not provide any documentation. If the investment is legitimate, you typically receive what we call a prospectus or an offering memorandum, sort of like a booklet or information document that you should be able to also find statements or public filings online by the promoter of the investment. So a lack of documentation about the investment is certainly a potential red flag of fraud. And verify anyone calling or claiming to be from the government. The SEC does not endorse investment offers or assist in the purchase or sale of securities or participate in money transfers. So, the SEC does not seek detailed personal or financial information. So if someone's telling you that they're with the SEC or that this is sort of SEC endorsed or anything like that, be careful and verify that, because that's not something that is typically going to happen.
And as Malvika had mentioned earlier, the concept of affinity fraud, you need to be aware of community fraud. And just because someone's from a similar background, you should still exercise due diligence on their investment. So an example of community-based fraud, the SEC brought a case against Ephraim Taylor for running a Ponzi scheme a few years ago. And Mr. Taylor marketed himself as the youngest Black CEO of a publicly traded company and also the son of a Christian minister. And he specifically targeted African-American churchgoers. He promised high rates of return to investors, and he promised he would invest their funds in businesses in economically disadvantaged areas, and that he would donate a portion of his profits to charity. But in reality, investor funds were used to pay other investors and were otherwise misappropriated. Some of the funds were used to finance Mr. Taylor's own personal expenses. And this Ponzi scheme cost investors over $11 million. So please keep in mind, even if you have that shared background with someone who's trying to sell an investment product to you, the same rules apply for any investment opportunity. Do your research the investment, and research the seller at the SEC's website, which is located at investor.gov.
Thank you, Joy. Rhonda, what about the FTC?
Sure. So the FTC has on its website, as well as a pamphlet that's available for order on our website called The Top 10 Things That You Can Do to Avoid Fraud. So I'm going to go through some of those, particularly as they relate to red flags when you're looking for some type of investment or money-making opportunity. It's going to be similar to what the SEC presented. Those are really great tips, and so here are a few more. Number one, spot imposters. Scammers often pretend to be someone you trust, like a government official, a family member, a charity, or a company you do business with. Do not send money or give out personal information in response to an unexpected request, whether it comes as a text message, a phone call, an email, or a social media post. Number two, do online searches, similar to what Joy and Malvika were talking about. Do your research. Do online searches. Type a company or product name into a search engine with words like review, complaint, or scam. Search for the phrase that describes the situation you're dealing with, such as IRS call. You can even search for a phone number, and I do this all the time to see if other people have reported them as a scam. I just type that phone number directly into the search engine and see what comes up about it. Do not believe your caller ID. Technology makes it very easy for scammers to fake caller ID information. This is called spoofing. The number and name you see may not be real. They can make it appear like the call is coming from a trusted number or even a government office. So if someone calls you asking for money or personal information, such as your social security number, your bank account number, Medicare number, may not relate to all the students on the call, but talk to your grandparents, account login credentials. They're asking for any of that information, hang up. And if you think the caller might be telling the truth, call a number that you know is genuine. For example, if it relates to your credit card, don't just answer that information from a cold call. Look on the back of your credit card and call that phone number. Next, hang up on robocalls. If you answer the phone and hear a recorded sales pitch, hang up and report it to the FTC at reportfraud.ftc.gov. These calls are illegal. And there are certain recorded calls that are legal, but if they're trying to sell you something, hang up. It's often bogus, and do not press 1 to speak to a person. Do not try to get them on the phone to ask to be taken off the list. And the reason I say that is it could lead to more calls because they'll know that they have a live number. Consider how you pay. Sending money through services like Western Union or MoneyGram is risky because it's nearly impossible to get your money back. Credit cards have a lot of protections for consumers. You can try to reverse the charges or do a chargeback, for example. You can't do that when you wire money to some random person in Florida through MoneyGram. It's also true for reloadable cards, such as MoneyPack or Reloaded, and gift cards, such as iTunes or Google Play. I may not know much, but what I do know is that the IRS will never ask you to pay your taxes with an iTunes gift card. Don't do it. Government offices and honest companies will not require you to use these payment methods. This one is very important. Do not deposit a check and wire money back. This is a very common scam. It's an oldie but a goodie that takes a variety of forms. Do not deposit a check and wire money back. Because what will happen is, because the bank by law has to make that money available to you within days, they will not know for several weeks that that check is fake. So you will be on the hook for it and you will owe that money to the bank. And the way it works, for example, someone's looking for a job, someone may say, oh, we need you to purchase equipment for the job. I'm going to send you a check for $2,000. You don't have $2,000 in your account. You deposit that check and they say, oh, we made an error. Actually, we need you to wire some of that money back to us. You wire the money through Western Union or MoneyGram. That money is gone. And when the bank realizes it's fake, you will owe that money back. Talk to someone you trust. Con artists want you to make decisions in a hurry. It's part of what they do, especially telemarketers. All they do all day is try to pressure people into spending the money. They may even threaten you. Slow down, check out the story, do an online search, or just tell a friend. We found that just talking to someone can prevent you from losing money. And as much as we love taking people to court, what I would rather see is people not lose their money in the first place. And we find that when people discuss a weird phone call that they received, they're less likely to spend the money. Check out consumer.ftc.gov. There's a jobs and money-making tab that has advice about assessing investments as well as other types of money-making opportunities. You can also sign up for alerts. And as we mentioned before, some money-making schemes may target specific communities. And by way of example, the FTC reached a settlement with a company that was operating as Oro Marketing that the FTC alleged in its complaint targeted Spanish-speaking women with false promises that they could make money reselling brand name goods such as Gucci and Ralph Lauren. The agency alleged that instead of actually fulfilling what they promised, the defendants charged hundreds of dollars upfront for shoddy generic products. And the FTC settlements required that Oro and the guy behind it turn over pretty much all of their assets so that we could try to get that money back to the consumers that they defrauded. And our order also required them to, they're not allowed to do any future sales pitches. And the FTC was able to provide partial refunds to defrauded consumers. But instead of giving people back a fraction of their money, what we would love is for them to not spend money in the first place. So check out ftc.gov, check out the SEC's website, and just try to avoid the fraud altogether and talk to your friends and family about it. And that's one of the best ways is to pass this information on.
No, that's excellent. That's a lot of information. I hope everybody's getting these gems. Just 2 orders of business, and then we'll go to the last set of questions for our panelists. So first order of business, if you look in the chat, some of the things that you're hearing that you might say, oh, it went too fast, it's in the chat. There are links, there are phone numbers in the chat, so check that out. Second order of business, if you have questions, you're welcome to put that in the chat as well. Me and some of the panelists will be monitoring that. We're definitely not going to get to all 107 questions, but we'll try to pick some out. So play the lottery there. So let me go to our last set of questions. I want to know what investors should do if they think they've been a victim of fraud. And kind of a parallel to that, how do investors report a fraud or learn more? We said do research. How do you learn more about investments and products? How do you do the research?
Well, first, in terms of reporting a fraud, if you think you have been a victim of a securities fraud, you should contact the SEC, and you can contact the SEC using our online portal called the TCR system, which is also known as the Tips, Complaints, and Referral System. And that can be found at www.sec.gov/TCR, and you can enter your complaint there. Also, if you can't access the online form, you're also able to call the SEC at 1-800-732-0330. Again, 1-800-732-0330, or email the SEC at help@sec.gov. So once again, help@sec.gov.
Yeah, and so if you think you've been a victim of, as Joy said, if you think you've been a victim of an investment fraud, you should definitely contact the SEC. We don't have the resources to investigate all the tips or complaints that we receive, because we receive a lot of them, but many of the investigations that the SEC does, do come from information submitted by investors and victims and other market participants. So, it's kind of like almost like community policing in a way. Like, we rely on the eyes and ears of the public in many of our cases. The SEC does bring an action as a result of the investigation that might have come in through one of these tips. It can ask a court or a fact finder to award monetary penalties and the return of illegal profits, which in legalese we call disgorgement. And in some appropriate cases, the SEC might even seek to return the money that it collected to the victims of the fraud or the scheme or whatever. So again, that's not something that is necessarily going to happen in every case, but that's certainly a possibility and something the SEC is able to do in some cases, tries to do in most, if not all of them.
Thank you, Jorge. And Professor, to answer your question regarding what can our investors, potential investors, do in terms of their research and diligence, there on our website, sec.gov, as well as investor.gov, we offer information in particular about investment products, where you can learn about the investment idea and scheme that someone is offering, as well as investment professionals that you're dealing with. So you can go on our website you can research the license the promoter, the advisor has, their disciplinary history, as well as their actual business. What do they do? How long have they been doing it? Are they in fact legitimate? Also, apart from licensing status, when you look up investment products, you'll also see related timely investor alerts. So investor.gov, we cannot say it enough. It is such an important tool. Even for me as an examiner, I specialize in private funds. Sometimes when I look at certain public filings, which is EDGAR, which is another tool, which I'll talk about next, even we rely on it. So it's a great database. Separately, we have this wonderful office called the Office of Investor Education and Advocacy. You can call this, they'll send you literature. They might even help you with research. So for the students out there, if you're looking up a new investment and you want to get some information, you might check out our website. Maybe you can even email them at help@sec.gov. They're not going to write your paper, but they can definitely point you to the right resources. And the phone number for our Office of Investor Education and Advocacy is 1-800-732-0330. And their email is help@sec.gov, but you can always start at the investor.gov page. Now, I just mentioned about EDGAR. EDGAR is the name of SEC's database that is both public and private. Private to the SEC, us examiners and enforcement staff, but it's also made publicly available to you, the public. There, it's also at sec.gov, but you should be able to type in EDGAR in the search box or look it up. So specifically, this has corporate information on public company filings, as well as operations of these public companies vis-a-vis their filings. So you can look up mutual funds, you can look up ETFs, you can look up variable annuities. So that's also edgar@sec.gov. Rhonda?
Thank you. So I'm going to pop some information into the chat so you all have it. You can report scams, fraud, bad business practices, and unwanted calls to the Federal Trade Commission at reportfraud.ftc.gov or call 877-FTC-HELP. You can also go to ftc.gov to find tips, learn how to avoid scams, subscribe for alerts. And I'll have to tell you, I work here and I subscribe to the consumer alerts because I don't know all the stuff going on. So I highly recommend it. You can also order free materials that you can share with local organizations and find information about reporting identity theft. That's also something that the FTC handles. FTC.gov also has materials and alerts specific to small businesses. And so we've given you all a lot of information about available resources, and I can't say it enough, one of the most effective ways to combat and prevent fraud is to talk to people about what you're seeing, share this information with your friends, family, neighbors, and local organizations to help them know how to avoid and report scams as well.
Great, thank you guys so much. So I know I do have a few questions. Again, if there are questions from students in the audience, you can either put it in the chat to everyone, or if you want and prefer, you can put it in the chat to me privately and I'll field those. So one question I have, because the last financial crisis, we had this concept of too big to fail, and there were really big banks that were getting government bailouts and that caused political trauma. Is there a concept in the fraud domain of too small to get caught? So if you're maybe small enough, or you just attack one church or one temple or just one community in Brooklyn, can you be too small to get caught?
I guess I can take it from the investment perspective. So what you see in front of you in the FTC and the SEC is two federal agencies. What actually exists are a number of federal, state, and local agencies who all work together to protect investors and consumers. So I'll give you a few examples. every state has some agency who will look at investment, potential investment fraud and consumer fraud. And then at the local level, here in New York, every county has a district attorney's office. So there is the potential for civil actions at the state level, in addition to the SEC and the FTC bringing actions. All right, so where the SEC, and I'll talk about the SEC specifically, may look at certain actions because we don't have unlimited resources. We may also communicate what we find or something that is told to us to some of those other agencies. So we may report it to a state agency, we may report it to a local agency. So there's the opportunity, no matter how big or small the fraud is, I would say report it, because we may, if we don't take the matter ourselves, it gives us an opportunity to evaluate it and make a determination whether or not one of the other agencies that I just mentioned may be appropriate to handle it.
No, that's great. Thank you. So one last question from me, and then Rich, I'll let you maybe ask some questions from your expertise. This question is specifically to Jorge, who mentioned a math bachelor's, and there are plenty of people who are scared of math and wouldn't have connected doing math in undergrad with what you're doing now. Would you be able to speak a little bit about why you're interested in math and what math does for you today, even though you're not a mathematician?
Yeah, sure. Math is fun. I think, you know, math is everywhere, right? Aren't we like counting numbers and percentages and elections? I mean, I always was attracted to sort of thinking about things in a logical, organized, numerical way. And it actually helps a lot because in the cases that we have, you know, so some of them, for example, involve econometric, like analysis of like an event that happened. So like somebody says something, and does that move the stock price of a security? So you have to do what's called sort of an event study, which an economist or a mathematician, statistician does. Sorry about that. So, you know, mathematics, I think, does certainly help if you're any interest, you know, if you have any interest sort of in like finance or the financial realm, so that you're not sort of afraid to, you know, talk about percentages or returns or rates of change or things of that nature. I also have a lot of cases now in the digital asset space. So, you know, you've heard of Bitcoin and you've heard of things like that. And you know, understanding cryptography is also something that relates to mathematics, and I think it makes it at least less scary. And so I do feel like that's helped me in my career because a lot of, you know, no offense to some of my lawyer colleagues on the panel, but a lot of lawyers are afraid of mathematics and numbers. And I think I always encourage people not to be, and to sort of see the usefulness of them to our day-to-day life. So, you know, I think it's helped me a lot, and there's certainly a lot of it in finance. So it's very relevant and productive.
Oh, great. Thanks for speaking to that. So I do have a few student questions, but Rich, let me turn it over to you to ask some questions that kind of come from your expertise, and then I'll see if I can get some of the student questions in.
Sure. I'm not sure. I will just put one question out there. I'm not sure how much what our time is, but one of the
we're doing good.
Oh, okay. Okay. One of the questions I throw out to the SEC panelists is, with the rapid growth of cryptocurrency and initial coin offerings, what should an investor look for when considering an investment opportunity involving digital assets?
Right. So yeah, thanks, Rich. I had just mentioned like digital assets, and it's something that the SEC has been focused on for some years now. Again, I mean, you know, the one that everyone knows about, of course, is Bitcoin, but there's a lot of digital assets out there, and you know, it's a new technology. So typically new technologies, I mean, this happened in the 2000s with the rise of the internet, is an opportunity for people to say, oh, you know, I have the next big one of these. You know, back then it was like, I have the next big Amazon or the next big Google or whatever. Now people will say, I have the next big, you know, whatever digital asset you want to say. So, I mean, what we say is, as with any investment opportunity, you should ask questions and demand clear answers about what's being offered to you, including including understanding how the product is being traded and by whom. Excuse me, the same general rules that we discussed about red flags earlier today remain true for cryptocurrency related investments as for any investment. So be wary of promoters who guarantee returns, people who pressure you to act too quickly or make claims that sound too good to be true. All of those same red flags certainly apply in this context.
And you should also be aware that there's significantly less protections for investors that invest in these products, because these products may trade overseas and your funds may travel quickly overseas without your knowledge, and increases the risk for regulators to be able to pursue those bad actors who may have absconded with your funds and recover your funds.
Thank you, Joy.
Oh, please, Malvika, you wanted to chime in, please.
I just thought it would be good for students to know that a lot of the early promoters of cryptocurrencies and Bitcoin offerings were actually well-known celebrities on Twitter, even Facebook. So students should be especially careful in just taking the word for celebrities, because one, they're getting paid for it and they often don't disclose that. And recently, the SEC had brought charges against a number of celebrities, including Floyd Mayweather, Steven Seagal, and well-known DJ Khaled for doing just that. So it goes back to, especially in new offerings or new investment schemes, you will see celebrities come out and promote this. So again, please be careful and do your diligence. Thank you, Professor.
No, that's great. Just one piggyback on this topic, and then I'm going to kind of switch topics, fielding some of the students' questions. So Bitcoin, crypto, now in the COVID era, we're seeing people don't like cash. In Europe, cash has been a big no-no for a while, but now even in the US, no coins, no cash accepted places here and there. What do we think from a regulatory perspective about directions towards a cashless society? And are there any concerns that regulators have about that?
Rhonda, do you want to take that one in terms of what the FTC has seen on, cashless economy and kind of the underground economy, if you have anything to say on that?
I don't have anything in particular on cryptocurrency, but what I will say is one thing to watch out for is some of the payment apps. One thing that we've been seeing is some of the peer-to-peer apps that people are using to send money to each other, things like Zelle. What we're seeing is that consumers do not realize that some of these payment methods do not have any protections for consumers. And I don't know the ins and outs of each one, but when people are, like everything we mentioned before, getting a cold call, think they're getting some kind of great investment opportunity, and they're sending something through one of these peer-to-peer payment apps, they will tell you these are meant for friends and family. And if you send this to someone you don't know, we cannot help you. So that's one thing to watch out for when using these types of new payment systems that are made to make life more convenient for people. They may not have the protections that you're used to if you're using a credit card or something like that.
No, that's great. So that actually, what you just said about credit cards segues into my change of topic. And Dr. Egby, this will be the last student question, and then I'll turn it over to you for closing remarks. So credit fraud is a big issue as well. And it's not a new COVID thing, but you get your credit report and there's something on there that isn't you, identity theft and these type of things. What steps can be taken to get help in regards to somebody using your identity or maybe putting incorrect items on your credit fraud? And is that something in the SEC, FTC domain?
In terms of identity theft, we actually operate, I think it's identitytheft.gov. Sometimes there's so many websites, sometimes I mix things up. But you can definitely get to it from ftc.gov. And if someone is the victim of identity theft, you would go through our website and it has step-by-step instructions of everything you need to do to report it. There's a process you follow on the website, and it gives a lot of information. And I've spoken with people who've been the victim of identity theft, and it is horrible. It can completely wreck your entire financial life. And one thing that people don't realize is not just the loss of money, but the loss of time that people spend trying to unwind these things. So it's important for people to make sure that they're looking, you mentioned putting charges on a credit card, looking at their credit card statement regularly. And if there are charges that you do not recognize, immediately contacting your credit card company and challenging it. Because what happens is fraudsters will sometimes do very, very small charges on your credit card bill to see if you're paying attention. It might only be $2 and it can be completely random. And if you get ahead of it, you can realize whether or not someone is using your identity or putting false charges on your credit card. And also in terms of identity theft, the FTC has a lot of information about what to know in terms of credit reporting bureaus, how to do an asset freeze, what's the difference between a freeze and putting a fraud alert, which one might be a better course for you. So there's a ton of information on our website related to that.
No, that's awesome. So I lied, a few more questions. I see the time and we are gonna wrap up, but this was for the students. So now we're getting into the stretch zone. We're gonna ask really specific questions that maybe you guys don't know, but this panel has stimulated circumstance in people. People are now starting to, based on their questions, be a little bit more careful to speak the language with the young people. So we're gonna get into specific apps now, if we dare. Zelly is a way to pay or send money to people. Cash App, Stash, Dave. I've only heard of half of these, but these are the questions I'm getting. Have you guys heard of these apps and are they safe? Or is that too specific?
Well, I've heard of them, and we at the SEC, we do not recommend or advise on any particular app, investment scheme, etc. As a regulator, though, if you are experiencing difficulty or you think you have been defrauded, absolutely reach out to us and we will look into it. Same with the FTC, as Rhonda is saying. My favorite app actually is Venmo. And the reason I like Venmo is because it actually asks you, you are giving and sending money for the first time to, for example, Joy. Do you know her? What's the last 4 digits of her phone number? So for me, as from a consumer standpoint, I can say that where there are built-in features that allow me to be more secure, that say to me, wait a second, you got to do one more step or take 2 more steps to verify who you're sending money to. Again, it goes back to trusting your instinct. And in this fast app technology world, we're so busy wanting to just do something that we don't take the time to pause. So that's just my consumer point of view.
No, that makes a lot of sense.
So Professor Zabro, I would direct the students to that case that Jorge mentioned, the Saeed Arbab case. The complaint in that case, it's SAYED ARBAB. And the reason that's important is that Mr. Arbab, as alleged in the complaint, used some of those same cash apps on students who were in school using their student loan money to get them to invest in a fraudulent scheme. So I think that looking at that complaint and the way that scheme unfolded is a great way for students to see how a cash app, no matter which one it is, could be used to perpetrate a fraud.
Indeed, indeed. Yeah, so students, please make sure you check that out as a case study. Just to close the
Can I mention one thing on that, Professor Zarval? I'm sorry, before we move on from the peer-to-peer payments, I just put something in the chat. It's the FTC's blog about what to look out for peer-to-peer payments. It's similar to what I was mentioning before. You have to be very careful with those because they may not have the same protections. And that post also mentions the FTC actually filed a lawsuit against Venmo related to how they were using people's privacy information. So in terms of the question about peer-to-peer payment apps, you can also check out the FTC settlement with Venmo. And I'm sorry, I cut off either Rich or Professor Sarbabal, so I apologize for that, but I just wanted to mention that.
No, we need that information from you. You guys are the experts. So to echo what we've heard from the panelists, it's not so much the app, although there are probably bad apps out there. It's the affinity-based aspect. The fraudsters, they don't care which app they use, right? It's the affinity techniques that they use. So while you're being on guard for the app, you need to be on guard for the affinity fraud as well, is what I'm hearing. So thank you. The Q&A has been robust and fun. I do want to give it to Dr. Egby and Dean Roll just to kind of wrap up and summarize what's happened here. You guys there? If not, that's okay. Technology has its way. Oh,
I hear you.
Dr. Egby, you were coming in. Just on
Yes, I'm here.
Great.
Are you hearing me?
Yes.
Okay. Thank you very much for coming. In fact, to talk about affinity fraud, one good example when people are pressuring you. I've been trying to get rid of one of my timeshare weeks, and wherever I go, what they try to do is tell me how to pay for it, and I'm saying, you're not telling me exactly what you're going to do. Are you going to buy this timeshare? Are you going to get the original timeshare company to buy it back? And they're not telling you exactly what they will do. But one key thing is they say you have to pay $3,000. Some say $1,000. Some say $2,000. Some say the pricing is not clear. This is number one. Number two, they will not accept payment by credit card. They want only cash or money order. And say, if we don't sell your timeshare, you get your money back. How do I know? If it's by credit card, then I will alert American Express that if within 6 months this doesn't go, I want my money back. And they don't want to accept it. And when somebody is putting that kind of pressure on you, you know very well that they are up to something that is not legitimate. There's an example from what I'm hearing the experts here about, those who are involved in this. Having said that, I want to thank once more Malvika, Joy Best, the SEC, the FTC, and all the panelists for helping us with this. We are glad that the community has this information, and our students who participated in this definitely are linked to friends and family, and they can relay the information to them. So thank you very much once more on behalf of the enrolled, the provost, and the president, and the McGivers College community.
Just to reward those students who have stuck it out and been attentive, do any of the panelists want to mention anything about internships or jobs or places to go on cyberspace if that's an interest?
Yeah, we can invite the students to check out, again, sec.gov/OHR/current students. I'm going to input this in the chat, so don't close it out right away. Also, if any of you are interested in applying for federal jobs at large, we encourage you to create a profile on usajobs.gov, and you can even set up alerts. So for example, for the honors program, you can get alerts from the SEC and it will tell you it's been posted for a specific region. If there's information on the website that you're finding a hard time navigating, you can call one of us, specifically Joy and I or Jorge, and we can try to help the professors out. But right now, give us some time because we're going to need our budget cleared, and also hopefully by the next calendar year, you should be able to find some information on our website. but it never hurts to create a usajob.gov profile and set up alerts that way too.
Thank you. Well, this has been exciting. FTC, please, Rhonda.
Oh, I just popped mine in the chat, so you'll have it.
Oh, great, great. So again, students, pay attention to the chat. We'll try to leave this up for a few minutes before we close out so you can get all the information. The phone numbers that you've heard are in the chat. The links that you've heard are in the chat. And there's a lot of other action and information in the chat as well. So Zoom is not going to go away, even if COVID does go away. So this is something you're going to have to get used to, students. I want to thank everybody as well from the FTC and the SEC, Dr. Egby and Dean Roll for leading this, and Malvika for kind of touching base with MEC and building this relationship.
It's our pleasure, Professor. And thank you for partnering with us. Rhonda will also be on future panels. She's graciously agreed to be with us. And just to let you know that we here at the SEC, you know, we take diversity and inclusion very seriously, so much so that our program today is actually sponsored by the Diversity Committee, and Joy and Jorge are two of the committee heads. So we will do more events. We'll stay in touch with Professor Zarbabal and Dr. Egby. Dean Roll, please keep us inspired. Thank you so much. Thank you, Rich Best. Thank you, Tom O'Doherty. Thank you very much to Judith Weinstock, who she's been with us, and you met her actually last year.
Yes.
And these are all our advisors. They support us, and you know, we're here for you guys. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much. So if you guys are concerned about getting this information, you can reach out to the Dean's office. Give it some time, but we'll have this information consolidated for you. We'll be following up on our end from MEC with students on surveys and next steps. And this has been great. So I'll just leave this open for a few minutes, but we're right on time. So thank everybody again.
All right, thank you and goodbye.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Have a great day.
Have a great day. You too.